My name is Tracy. I'm a water resource professional. My degrees are actually in geography, and I am a senior scientist for Hydro Solutions. A topic near and dear to my heart is water resources, and that includes all kinds of water, and that would be stormwater. That would be water in lakes and springs and rivers and oceans and estuaries, but it also includes water from wastewater plants. It includes water from underground in our aquifers. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about my perspective of the water cycle. And I'm going to start with stormwater. So stormwater is when we have water that comes down from the sky and it comes over our land. And in doing that, it moves in a few different ways. We have overland water when it kind of runs down your street. And then that can be brought into the municipal separate storm sewer. So it is a collection of all of the water that transports it, and then typically it will discharge into a river or a lake, sometimes into wetlands. And so we would call that both overland, and then at the end of the pipe, right, is where we would call it a point source. When water falls down over the urban landscape and it travels, it actually begins to collect pollutants. It can be small little particulates of soil and dirt. It can be rocks, but it also can include hydrocarbons from cars, from their oils that get onto the street. It can also include metals from tires and from industrial activities. It can include fertilizer. And that all comes over land and through pipes into eventually our water resources, our lakes, our rivers, and estuaries, and our wetlands. And so we now understand that our land use, whether it be industrial, commercial, residential, agriculture, and even natural, convey pollutants into our water bodies. Water is also flooding. So our communities and our floodplains swell with water during certain times of the year. So what we do in our water management is we understand that we plan for certain kinds of events, storm events that bring water onto the earth. And through that, we have what we would say standards for best management practices to control both the flooding and the movement of those pollutants that we discussed earlier into our natural system. So our best management practices include what we call retention and detention systems. So a retention system is we want to take as much water as we can. And you might see this oftentimes in ponds, a retention system, and it holds back that water for flooding so we don't send too much into our rivers and our creeks and our lakes at one time. When we do detention, that is actually when we hold a water body back. We also have the water that comes from the ground. We also talked about water from wastewater treatment plants, and it is water. We do not just take sewage from houses and take it from your house to a treatment plant and dump it in. That's not the way it works. There's lots of processes that we do to treat that water so that it is not yucky, but it is wonderful. It is now safe in many different ways. It no longer has viruses and bacteria that can make you really sick. And that's an important part of our water cycle. We are now beginning to see our water as an integrated approach. We're not doing stormwater and wastewater anymore. Now we're looking at it as a whole. And that is completely revolutionizing our industry in how we reuse it, because we no longer have any biases of where it comes from, because we now understand that all water is water. So one of the most exciting things that we've been doing in the last 20 years is we've been reusing that water. And we don't judge it by its history, we judge it by its quality. And that is now looking at our overland water as well as water that comes from wastewater treatment plants. And we say, how does our community really need this? And so we do really cool things to treat it based on how we want to use it. So when we reuse water, because we no longer look at stormwater as a nuisance, we look at it as a resource. We no longer look at effluent from a wastewater treatment plant as a nuisance of something to dispose of and get rid of. We now look at it as an opportunity to use it in the place that it needs the most. So that might be irrigation. So we can treat all that water and we can use it on our parks and our soccer fields or even our front lawns. Other types of water would be to almost drinking water standards. And it's beautiful, clean water. But what could we use that for? Well, we can use that for industrial. They can use this reuse water and they can do cooling towers and all kinds of wonderful electrical production without using that pristine, awesome water from our aquifer. Other types of reuse could actually be to drink it and to augment our aquifer. So one of the primary things that you can do at home in your own community is wash your hands and wash them appropriately. However, don't leave the water running while you're washing your hands. Also, don't leave the water running while you're brushing your teeth. Hey, don't leave the water running when you are cleaning your dishes. Make sure that you're using your water wisely and apply all the conservation practices that you know, because if you use less of it now, we'll have more of it later. Water is water, and that's why we have to recycle it, but we also need to be responsible with the clean water that we have. Another really awesome thing that you can do is don't put grease or oil down your drains. If you see somebody doing that, just help them to put it into a can or other appropriate receptacle to dispose of it properly. Education and encouragement goes a long way, even in our own homes. There are so many wonderful resources available to us to help us understand how we can do our part to protect our local water bodies. The United States Geological Survey, they have opportunities for data that is specific to your neighborhood, and you can find that on their National Water Information System by choosing Georgia on the pull-down menu, and then that will give you an understanding of some of the surface waters and more information about your watershed at your home. There's also Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission. They talk a lot about sediment and erosion and what that can do to our waters and how you can prevent that through soil stabilization and using natural vegetation that are local to your particular area and to avoid the invasive exotics. And also the Water Reuse Association has some wonderful educational videos about how we use water and the water cycle and how not to judge water by its history, but instead by its quality.